Blog Talk Radio.
Namaste, everybody. Welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. It is August 6th, 2014. I am your host, Andrew Fisher, broadcasting every Wednesday from the suburbs of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to expose the true and false nature of reality for what reality is and what reality isn't. And today we will be having John G. Vibes, yet another person who presented at the Philadelphia Free Your Mind Conference in April 2013. I was there, didn't see his presentation, but like all the people there, I contacted them to get some guests on my show, and he responded. I'll have another conference guest on my show next week, Frater X. I don't know if he was at the 2013 one or the 2011 one, but he will be next week. But John G. Vibes is the guest tonight. Interesting. I'm not really sure who he works for or doesn't work for. I tried to do some research on him to figure out what to put in the profile, the description for my show tonight, and I discovered it was kind of hard to deduce what he works for now and what he does now and what he did in the past, and he told me to change the video description for that reason, and I was like, I had a feeling you'd ask that because I did research on you on the internet, and there really isn't, it's hard to tell what you are doing now and what you did in the past and if what you're doing in the past is now, but when I let him on, I'll try to give him a moment or two to correct that also people will know what the deal with him is. I know he loves raves, and he's in on the rave scene, and he seems to feel that a lot of people talk about raves in negative ways, like associated with drugs and all, like ecstasy, but no, it's not like that. I'm sure he's going to talk about some of the good things about raves, and he's also seems to be an expert on the state of affairs in the world. That's what I have deduced from watching his Free Your Mind Conference 2013 presentation. I had to quickly skim through it just to get a quick recap of what it was that he talked about. We'll definitely elaborate on a lot of stuff that he talked about then, but first we are going to do the news, courtesy of Alex Jones and Company at InfoWars. Oh, good, I see a 443 area code in the list. Hopefully that is John G. Vibes, but first we're going to do the news. I'll get him on in 8 minutes at the latest. First article, Biden on illegal minors. These are our kids, he says. He said, world will judge America by the way it treats illegal immigrant children. Well, illegal immigration, some would say, doesn't the right to liberty and right to locomotion, and doesn't that give you the right to cross borders without government permission or paperwork filing? Well, no, you have to understand that people do have the right to ask the government to protect the borders. In fact, the number one reason government was created, if there was one specific reason, was to protect the borders from outside threats, the borders of the people that are under the auspices, the area under the jurisdiction or auspices of that specific government for that area, be it local, state, federal. And a country like Mexico, with all the gang stuff and the fighting and everything and the killing and the disease, and you kind of have to understand we need to protect the borders from a country like Mexico where all sorts of hell is breaking loose. And it's not like we're, like Alex Jones said on one of his Sunday shows recently, it's not like we're bordering Switzerland, which is a peaceful country. No, Mexico, the government needs to protect us from outside threats, and there has to be a process on letting illegals in. But the government, and in this case Joe Biden, says it's okay to let them in illegally. All right, next article. Obama's war against Russia backfires. For everybody except Obama's patrons, his policies regarding Ukraine are disastrous. Yes, I'm sure we conspired with Ukraine to shoot down that Malaysian plane, and now we're blaming Russia to justify going to war in the area so we can create World War III. And coincidentally, at the same time, the Jews and the Palestinians in Israel are going nuts at each other. What a coincidence that's happening at the same time. I think that's the globalists manipulating things the way they want to manipulate it. Will they create a World War III? Well, my favorite source of information, Andrew Bartzis, says that the Archon control system is cannibalizing itself now, and he asserts that because we are infinite, everything is possible, the state of affairs on this timeline will, for all intents and purposes, make it impossible for there to be a World War III. So that doesn't mean we should sit back and relax. That means we should do everything we can to prevent the war to make sure the timeline plays out in a positive way. All right, next article. Leaked documents show no-fly list has grown tenfold under Obama. Blacklist bigger than ever after underpants bomber-driven crackdown. The underwear bomber. Definitely a staged event. Just ask Kurt Haskell. He had military-grade explosives in his underpants. The shoe bomber had military-grade explosives in his shoes. The point of that is military. Military is part of the government. It implies it was staged by the government. And Webster Tarpley, in I think it was the Fall of the Republic documentary, he gave a brilliant connect-the-dots talk about how you can show that Umar Farouk Abdul Muttalib, the underwear bomber, and Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, and Faisal Shahzad, the Times Square bomber. You can connect the dots with them. They were all trained at the same school. And Anwar al-Awlaki, the CIA lackey, as Tarpley called him, he had a connection to all three. And don't believe for a moment that Anwar al-Awlaki has been murdered. He is probably basking in the sun for doing what the government wanted him to do to further their agenda. All right, next article. North Carolina sheriff to residents, fight back against crime by taking up arms. You better be able to take care of business until we get there if you have to protect your family. Well, whoever this North Carolina sheriff is, he knows what he's talking about. He seems to understand that the sheriff has the authority to kick the government out of a local area. People might be prejudiced against the police and all because of what they're doing, but if there's one law enforcement person you want in your town, it's a sheriff, because sheriffs do have the authority to kick out the federal and also the state governments, for that matter, if they try to impose their will upon the small towns. So love our sheriffs, but make sure our sheriffs aren't tyrannical. And this one understands that if we lose the right to bear arms, we lose everything, because we can't defend ourselves against tyrannical government. That's why we need guns. Next article, NATO warns Russia will use humanitarian mission as pretext to invade Ukraine. NATO and Russia engage in renewed Cold War brinksmanship. NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization, but they have imposed their will in other places around the world besides the North Atlantic. It's all a name game scam. Change the Department of War name into the Department of Defense, because people think defense sounds more peaceful than war. Give it the name North Atlantic Treaty Organization. No, it's okay. They'll just stay in the North Atlantic. No, they'll try to create a global empire of sorts. And for all intents and purposes, NATO is designed to be the headquarters of the global army that the globalists want to impose. All right, next article. Centers for Disease Control remain silent on potential Ebola victims in U.S. Health officials received dozens of calls from hospitals concerned about patients returning from West Africa. Yes, why are we letting Ebola people into this country and not making sure that they're in a very safe environment? Are you trying to poison us? And what are the odds that Obama signs a executive order, an illegal executive order, which he does not have authority to pass, but he thinks he can do it anyway, saying that the government can detain anyone who has a respiratory problem, regardless of what the cause of the respiratory problem is, and then they let these Ebola people in? Are they trying to give us a disease so they can justify putting us in FEMA camps? It's a terrible thought, but you can't rule that out. All right, next article. This is red-linked. A cop says, if Obama doesn't follow the Constitution, we don't have to. I don't give a damn. Well, we got to make sure that this video goes viral, so whoever this cop is and all, they can show that this is the way police are not supposed to act. Nobody is above the law, and just because the federal government thinks they're above the law, does that make you above the law? No. So let's I encourage you all to send emails to this cop. Click on this red-linked article on Infowars.com. Cop, if Obama doesn't follow the Constitution, we don't have to. And give him hell about it. All right, one last article here. I do have to say something about myself for personal news related from local standpoint. I think you'll like this, but I'll try to make this quick so I can get to that. Amnesty supporter hits woman protesting illegal immigration with his truck. After hitting woman, Amnesty supporter told her he didn't appreciate what she was doing, so he hit her with a truck. God, this is a crazy world we're living in. All right, one more thing I want to talk about from a local news standpoint. The township of Babington, I don't live there. I live very near there, but they just recently installed their red light cameras. Well, as any of you who have been listening to my show know, I am on a mission to spread that video on the Alex Jones channel called Secrets Police Don't Want You to Know. And in that video called Secrets Police Don't Want You to Know, I encourage you all to watch it. It's 2.5 hours long, but trust me, it's totally worth watching because it holds a secret to keeping billions in stolen revenue out of the hands of the corrupt cops, tyrants in government, the politicians, the judges, the prosecution attorneys, and even the car insurance salesman. And he proves all that and in that video, and he shows that there's a way to get out of paying red light cameras because red lights and all their traffic laws only apply to commercial drivers that are transportation laws only apply to commercial drivers, including red light laws, and there's a red light camera letter you can use to get out of that. I went to the Abington Commissioners meeting in January to tell them what you're doing is illegal with these cameras because they only apply to commercial drivers, the red light laws do, but they installed the cameras anyway, and just below that was an article talking about how William Kelly, the Abington police chief, was named the Pennsylvania Chief of Police Association president. How sick and disgusting and insulting that the articles are one above the other. The red light camera one was front page headline. And, I shot a video on my YouTube channel, which is Fan of 2012, if anybody wants to check it out, about this to voice my displeasure and how I posted some links on some articles and post on the Abington Police Department and Township web pages to show them my displeasure, saying, I already explained this was illegal. What's your problem? You're not supposed to be doing this. And then I also posted a link to Eddie Craig's video. So I don't think they were going to obey the law. It's absolutely sick and disgusting. But without further ado, it's 10 after the hour. I said I'd get John on now, so I believe this is him, area code 443. Let's get him on the air. Area code 443, John G. Vibes, is that you?
Hello, am I on?
Yes, you are on the air. Welcome. And John, I wanted to give you the opportunity to get everyone up to date on what you're doing in the present time, because I told you when I did research about you on the internet to try to figure out what to put in the video description, it was hard to deduce what you were doing in the past and what you're doing now, and if the things you were doing in the past are the things you're doing now. So I'm going to give you the opportunity now to clear up the confusion and tell everybody what you're doing and what you're concerned about and what you're trying to do for humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. There were just some rough, minor things because I released a book a few years back, and the publisher actually ended up being a crazy Obama-supporting con artist and just, disappeared and jacked up the price of the book and, totally, didn't pay me like he agreed to and stuff like that. So I ended up republishing the book under a different name. And so the old name is in a lot of my bios and stuff like that. But the book is finally re-released after a few years, and this time it is titled Alchemy of the Timeless Renaissance. And it's about 60-some chapters going into the history of world banking and public education, stuff like that, as well as some more, upbeat topics like, how to improve the world through raising its level of consciousness, going into certain, traditional lies that we're being told and revealing kind of the true history of our species, at least as I see it. With history, it's a lot of everybody's opinions about artifacts and things like that. So I'm not saying it's total truth, my view of history, but I've put a lot of research into it, and I'm fairly confident with it.
Okay, and it seems that you have some sort of an interest in raves. Someone might see that and think, oh, that's a bad sign. Raves, that's acid, that's ecstasy, that's people going nuts and acting really stupid and all. But no, people, that's a stereotypical way of looking at raves. I'm interested in knowing what is it that you have so much interest in about the rave scene.
Well, that was actually one of the things that really set off my activist life and things like that as well, because it is really a community that is about really amazing things, despite the stereotypical, vilification of it. And there is imperfections, of course, like there is in any community, and that's humanity. That's how we're an imperfect species, obviously. So basically, the main tenet of the rave scene, at least as it was, towards the beginning as it was founded, recently there's been some corporate corruption and stuff like that there, but it's peace, love, unity, and respect. And that is how people are supposed to behave to one another in this community, and this is how it's supposed to. We believe that's how it's supposed to be in the world, and our community is proof of the fact that it is possible. At least that's how I see it. And all my life I've had a resistance to authority and all of the obviously screwed up things in our world that the mainstream and most people want to turn their backs from. But it wasn't until I really got into the rave scene that I saw that another world was possible. Prior to that, I was just completely cynical. I felt that, this is just the way it is. The world's screwed up. I might as well just try to enjoy it. Just a completely hedonistic, nihilistic way of looking at things until I saw that a better world is possible. And, I feel that there's a lot of opportunity in this community to educate people about these issues. And, like I said, it's kind of withered away over the years, so that's why I take it as a personal responsibility as somebody who is involved in contributing to the community to actually keep the messages alive and, keep on putting forward what this community is all about so it just doesn't get washed down with the music. Because once upon a time, hip-hop was about something, and now it is not. And, the same thing goes with a lot of rock music and punk and stuff like that. It's been watered down to the point where there's no message anymore, and it's just about a music or a style or something like that. And it's really a lot more than that.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
It's counterculture is what it is, basically. And that is something that I'm also really into studying.
Oh, yeah, counterculture like punk movement, goth movement, all that stuff. I remember Indigo Child Matias De Stefano once said we should not be prejudiced against punks, goths, and people that are following different fashions, so to speak. They are here to raise the vibration of the earth. Don't you agree that there is some truth to that statement?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And I personally believe that counterculture is, even though it was first identified in the, the 70s, the 1970s, I think that the counterculture is something that's been with us throughout all of human history because of the fact that, ever since, these controls and authorities have popped up in our lives, there have been people who have rebelled every generation. There have been alchemists, there have been abolitionists, there were speakeasies, there were people all throughout time who have resisted the established orders, and in one way or another, it did not have to be, just music or art, but that is profound as well. Sometimes art and music can be just as profound as, doing something on the activist front because it can change the hearts and minds of people, and that's where I believe that real change actually begins.
Yeah, I believe that too. I know what it's like with the counterculture. People did call me abnormal because there was a period of time where I was a frequent shopper at Hot Topic. I don't really need to elaborate on that, but now that I know that people like me were designed to raise the vibration of the earth, I don't have to feel guilty or ashamed about that, and nobody should. And I should say, hey, you should feel bad for trying to put me down for being abnormal because I was doing everyone a favor. But moving on to another subject, the word alchemy. That word appeared as the first word in the title of your book. There seems to be a lot of confusion over what that term is. Let's make it very clear. It's not just turning worthless metal into gold. No, there's a lot more to that. And since you decided to make that the first word to the title of your book, I'm going to guess that you feel that you have a pretty good idea of what the word alchemy actually means. So could you please elaborate on the meaning of the word alchemy?
Yeah, well, generally I would say that the example that you gave of turning lead into gold, I believe is an analogy for the human consciousness. So basically, I believe that the alchemists were just, in the long line of rebels that I was discussing earlier, but they wanted to raise the human consciousness from the current state of lead to a state of gold, which I just believe is I don't believe it's some, like ascension or whatever, like a lot of the New Agers do and stuff like that. I believe that it's more of a way of living and a way of being and a type of culture that we could create on this planet that actually does something for the planet. So I believe that it's a very here and now thing. It's not necessarily a personal thing. It's like, you know, for the next generation and things like that. And you know, the Philosopher's Stone, I believe, is also a metaphor, and different you know, researchers have had different perspectives on what the Philosopher's Stone actually is. And I'm, you know, kind of conflicted because, as I've said, you know, history is many different people's interpretation. But, you know, I believe that the Philosopher's Stone is just the quest for this, you know, freedom and independence and individuality and you know, abundance on this earth. Is there any particular opinion that you have on it? You seem to have you know, some interest in that topic as well.
Oh yes, I once did read the book by Vincent Bridges and Jay Widener, A Monument to the End of Time. It had a lot to do with alchemy, so I became very familiar after I read that book about it, about how it is a sort of a, well, how do I put this? It has to do with raising consciousness. There is some correlation between alchemy and raising consciousness, and one might say it's the state of making everything pure again. But what is pureness? Well, there's a lot of debate in that regard. Maybe that has to do with why there's a lot of debate over the true meaning of the word alchemy. But I do think about it in a sense of pureness and raising consciousness, and making everything not necessarily utopian, but better again. That's the way I look at it. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you know, that word utopia that you brought up is a good one to point out, because when we talk about, you know, raising consciousness and changing the way that people interact with each other on this earth, a lot of people see that as a utopian vision. And I don't believe that that's the case, because of the fact that, you know, if we do bring about a world where there, you know, where as a rule people treat each other better and there isn't this kind of oppressive relationship that certain groups of people have with others, then I'm sure that there are still going to be disagreements. There's still going to be your random crazy person. And that's fine, and accidents will happen, and sometimes tragedies will happen, and that's what life and being human is all about. But there won't be this kind of systematic violence and oppression and just apathy that exists now. So that's one thing that I think is really important to mention in conversations like this, because people think that you're being utopian just because you want to change the way that people interact with each other on this planet. That doesn't mean that you're trying to create a perfect world. And that's just one distinction that I think is really important to make.
Yes, and things that I want to talk about in this talk that I think we might as well use that Free Your Mind 2013 conference presentation you did as a little bit of a guide. Maybe we can go subject by subject and elaborate in great detail on the stuff that you only talked about for an hour. We got more time in this show to talk about that. But I know you talked a lot about the banking system. And, well, first of all, the banking system can be summed up in a simple description of it's designed to screw over everybody, the people and the governments, because the best way to enslave a society is to loan them money that does not exist and charge them interest on the loans, because that makes debt and inflation unavoidable. It's impossible for people to pay everything back, so there will always be slavery, in this case debt slavery. And I mean, it's a lot more complex than just that. But what are the things about the banking system that you are most concerned about?
Well, first of all, my problem, the thing that I think is most important to point out, and it's the first thing that I look for in every human interaction, and that is, you know, is it voluntary? Is it chosen? And, no, it's not. We're forced to use this currency. People are arrested for minting different currencies, as we saw a couple of years ago with the guy who did the Liberty Dollar. And, just generally, legal tender laws, everything like that. People are forced into this currency, and it's also a monopoly, which is another problem that I have with it. I think that people should be free to trade with whatever they want, and I believe that the best currencies would win out, and that there would be alternative currencies that people would use. People would barter in some situations. I mean, I know in my own life that when I have the ability and, I barter. So I don't think that with our technology and everything like that, I don't think that it's unrealistic to think that we would be able to not create different currencies and barter effectively. So that's kind of my feelings on that. Obviously, the Federal Reserve and all that plays a big role in this whole scheme and oppression, but it's definitely bigger than that because there's global banks all tied in with that as well, and they're all connected to various elitists who have owned land and banks for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Right, and there are some modern-day things involving money that I'd like to discuss. First of all, some people are saying we should jump on the Bitcoin bandwagon. Others say, no, it's not in your best interest to do that. Another thing that's an issue, of course, is the fact that the globalists want a global electronic currency for which there are fundamental implications for freedom because you can't use cash as a backup, and if the electronic currency you're not allowed to use it, well, then you're screwed. I mean, some say there would still be cash, but you would have to go through all sorts of invasive procedures to get it if the globalists have their way and get that global electronic currency you want. So that's Bitcoin, the global currency. And one thing that's especially concerning now is on July 1st, that new law went into effect where foreign countries that use the dollar as their global reserve currency need to report to the IRS and disclose their info, and countries are not willing to do this, and they are dumping the dollar. Porter Stansberry did a presentation about this, and he strongly encouraged people to prepare for a financial collapse. Because of this, he said this is going to signal great devaluation in the dollar. So if I'm guessing you might have looked into that. So Bitcoin, the global currency, and the modern-day thing about the July 1st law with the IRS and everything, are you concerned about those things? What specifically?
Well, actually, yeah, I have a rather unique opinion on Bitcoin because it's not on one side or the other. I kind of have an objective view of it. Basically, I don't have a problem with there being a currency that is accepted globally. That people can trade across borders and stuff like that. What I do have a problem with is currencies that people are forced into, and that is why I don't have necessarily a moral issue with Bitcoin, but I do have a logistical issue with Bitcoin. I personally have lost 4 Bitcoin wallets with minuscule amounts of Bitcoin in it, and it's extremely frustrating and irritating, and that was just to me test it out. And I personally think that it's a good idea in a lot of senses. It allows some people to avoid paying the erroneous and illegal income tax. It allows some people to get around prohibition, like with the Silk Road and things like that. So in some ways it does have uses, but I think that it would be foolish to put any money that you are planning to not lose into Bitcoin because of the fact that, you lose a password, computer crashes, any random thing like that, you can lose it at any minute. I do not think that Bitcoin started as some kind of plot. However, I do think that as soon as it came on the scene, the powers that shouldn't be were like, oh, what can we do here? How can we jump on this? How can we use this to our advantage? This is kind of in line with the kind of stuff that we want to do, so let's try to take advantage of it. And then, like you said, they're trying to take away the anonymity that's involved with it. And as soon as you take away the anonymity that's involved with it, then all the, useful options as far as avoiding taxes and prohibitions and things like that, that goes entirely out the window. And then you're just stuck on kind of a intangible digital currency that really isn't doing you any good. So that's kind of my feelings on that.
All right. How about are you concerned at all about the global electronic currency thing? If you've been doing any specific research on that?
Oh yeah. The centralization of currencies that the bankers have been planning for a long time, which was kind of in line with the euro and the Amero and stuff like that. And the Bancor was one that they were planning. And I think now they're looking into going more digital. That is definitely a concern because, as I said, that's just going to replace the current fiat currencies that exist. And, fiat currency is just a currency that is valuable because the government says so, in layman's terms. So that is not something that I believe in. I feel that the only way that a currency should come on the marketplace is spontaneously because it works between people. I'm not really in favor of these, currencies and ways of trading that come down from on high, because that just usually it's going to be of a great benefit and advantage to whoever's putting it out there.
Yeah, it's a good point. And in regards to the timeline of our money system, I did mention how some say, like Porter Stansberry, that inflation is going to run rampant because of the new law that foreign countries that use the dollar as a reserve currency must report to the IRS, and they aren't going to want to do that. And other people say it's absolutely pathetic that Earth is this is according to ET contactee Alex Collier, Earth is the only planet in the Milky Way in which its alien inhabitants use money. All the others exchange money in some sort of energy system, be it love from the heart or something else. And it's not something we humans could adequately imagine, but that's what those higher level aliens do, higher level consciousness aliens do. And it's all the more confirmation that we're living on a prison planet. So some say, well, we're never going to get there because humanity is doomed. Others say, no, if we raise our consciousness enough, we'll be like all those planets. But the point is, timeline of the banking system and finance for the future. What do you specifically see?
Well, personally, I'm optimistic because I really feel that that's my only option. And, I feel that as this situation progresses, people are going to continue to, resist what's going on, and they're going to continue to come up with better ideas. I honestly do believe that Bitcoin was an effort, and, it may turn a lot of people on to the idea of thinking creatively about alternative currencies and stuff like that. I don't think that it's the solution. I think that barter can be made a lot easier by the technology that we have today. Exchange rates can be calculated on smartphones extremely quickly. We can tie currencies into any kind of commodities through our cell phones in the same way that we handle exchange rates. And, I'm not a technician, so I don't know how that would work, but that's just one idea to say that it is possible. And the problem here is that not enough people are working on this stuff yet. we have a lot of engineers trying to figure out how to build bombs and drones and cameras that can see from space. But, we don't have enough people trying to figure out these big problems. And I think that more and more, though, there is. I'm sure, you sound like you've been in this research a while. And as much as sometimes it is depressing to kind of talk to your fellow people out there, there are more and more people who are starting to wake up. And you can kind of feel a little bit more comfortable talking about this stuff out in public. And more people usually are going to be like, yeah, something's going on here. So that has made me very optimistic to the fact that, maybe we are going through a point where we're going to see that kind of resistance, and, that it's just going to all come down for them, and that, alternative currencies will be the future, and that people will basically be bartering, but they will be using currencies as well in their bartering. So people will have some money in this, some money in that. Maybe they'll have money in gold. Maybe they'll have some money in some paper currency. Maybe they'll have, a little bit of cryptocurrency for some reason or another. I think that people will diversify their assets after freedom comes. If freedom comes. If freedom doesn't come, we'll all be enslaved under a global currency that's forced on us.
Right. Another thing that you seem concerned about that you mentioned, the education system. The public school system is by far the worst, although the non-public schools are getting worse and worse every day, resembling children's prisons and adolescent prisons of sorts. And the worst part about it is the teachers and the administrators are not aware that there is a public school prison conspiracy going on, and the small handful that do wouldn't dare say anything about it, because if they did, they would lose their job, and there goes the $60,000+ a year that they make to get through their daily lives. And even worse thing, like I said, this more and more schools are becoming prisons. It seems like the schools are trying to violate kids' rights more and more and more. I mean, to say that people under age 18 who are minors do not have the same rights as adults is asinine. We're all children of the Creator, also known as infinite consciousness, some call it Source. It's all the same entity. It's the only entity that can grant rights, so we all have the same rights. I mean, one could certainly make the argument that as part of a child's development, it is necessary in situations for the parents to restrict the rights of the kids in order for them to properly develop, such as making sure their kids don't play with guns to exercise their right to bear arms if they're only 1 year old, if you know what I mean. But the schools do not have authority to do that. The parents are the only ones that can decide whether or not the school can take away the rights of a kid. But the problem is that that is not the case. There are schools like Alex Jones of InfoWars has often talked about that will ignore the parents' warning and say, we reserve the right to do this with your kid. If you don't go along with it, we will expel your kid. It's getting absolutely sick and disgusting. And I know about this when I did report in my junior year of high school on school locker searches. And in my doing that research for that, I noticed that the courts throughout the past several decades definitely do not seem to care about students' rights. And the New Jersey versus TLO Supreme Court case is by far the most notorious example. You guys can do your own research on that if you want. But it makes you wonder, is taking away the rights of kids a stepping stone to taking away the rights of adults? Well, the obvious answer to that question is yes. And the school system is one way to indoctrinate not just the kids but the adults into the conditioning. So now that I've babbled long enough about this, what are the things you're concerned about in regards to the education system?
Well, we're definitely on the same page there. I mean, me personally, going through that prison system that they call education was definitely, without a doubt, the most traumatizing experience of my life. That just took me years to repair myself mentally and emotionally after that indoctrination process. And that might sound crazy and hyperbolic to some people, but I believe that that's the truth. And I believe that most people have that experience, but are just afraid to put it into those terms. And I also think it's important to mention that, public schools in general, the very idea of public schools is one of the major pillars of the Communist Manifesto that is already into place in most of the world, I'd say now. So, and the type of schooling that we have is the Prussian model of education, which is the model of education that actually developed the brainwashed people that allowed the Nazi Empire to happen. So, that's where we're at. I believe that there is some hope, though. There's homeschooling for people that don't like that idea. There's plenty of options for children to learn in environments where they are free and, their individuality and their path in learning is respected. Many of these schools subscribe to the Montessori, School of Learning, which is a French psychologist. I don't believe she's alive anymore. It may have been nearly 100 years ago. I'm not sure of the exact date. Could have been 50. That she was alive and wrote books on how, children learn and grow naturally. They don't need to be forced down a path. This whole idea of raising a child or molding a child and stuff like that, I think is mostly a product of oppressive rulers who were trying to indoctrinate children through their parents. Now, that's not to say that we should just let children run free and do whatever they want, but it means that I personally believe that our species needs to take a look at how we treat children and, just generally our relationship with children, because that is what is creating this nightmare that we all grow up in, is because we have these psychopaths around the world. And, of course, there's a lot of, systematic problems here, but I believe even that comes from children acting out what they're taught as children. Because children turn into adults someday, and the adults that we have running around in this world are not very impressive. So I think that we need to look at the root, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do understand, but there is a little bit of a debate going on in regards to this. So some people have said there should be no schools, children should be out playing and getting used to their environment, and you should definitely let them spend some time out in nature. Among other people, David Icke said that at his Wembley presentation in 2012 October, which I was at, by the way, in London, and a great presentation. And other people have said, no, that isn't right. It would not be a bad idea to have schools, but you just got to change the period schedule, like maybe Period 1, spirituality. Period 2, true history and conspiracy theories. Period 3, physical education. You get them playing out in nature. Period 4, maybe you have a learning how to meditate or something like that. I'm sure you're getting my drift here. The point I'm trying to make is if schools do exist, they should teach metaphysics to understand how science really works and everything that mainstream science is hiding from us, and also maybe teach us true history and the fact that conspiracy theorists were right and all. And, some say that might be a bad idea. So do you think we should or should not have schools? And if we do have schools, how would you schedule the hypothetical schedule of classes?
Well, I believe that there is value in a classroom learning environment, but one of the problems that I have with the current school system is that it is compulsory, and it doesn't allow families to decide what is right for them. So I personally believe that that decision is up to the family. I don't believe that it's right to have a one-size-fits-all solution for every single person and put them into it. But at the same time, like I said, I do believe that there is value in classroom settings. And I think that if we did have a free society, that there would be very creative ideas and there would be a lot of different options for people for which path that they would, think is best for their child's education. Because I think that the parents really and the children themselves, when they get old enough, don't have the kind of decision-making power in the society about how their personal education should be. I mean, maybe they get to vote on this and that or whatever, but they're still voting on a one-size-fits-all solution instead of allowing, for their individual needs.
Yes, and some would say that if you're going to school your kids, homeschooling is the way to go. I mean, we could debate that all day long. Like, could we maybe improve the schooling system in a way that'll be better than homeschooling? I don't know. It's a debatable issue. People can take their sides on this. I'm glad you did give your take on this, but might as well move on to another subject. I heard you mention the New Age movement. It is a scam. It was designed to entrap people who saw through the scam, the brainwashing system that is known as religions. Out of all the religions, Buddhism is the one that's the most accurate in terms of metaphysics, but in the end, even they got it wrong. And in the New Age movement, as I said, is designed to entrap all the people that see that religion was a scam. And by the way, Mark Passio, who set up the Free Your Mind 2013 conference, which you were at, I do encourage everybody to watch his 7-hour talk which you can find on YouTube, about how the New Age movement is a scam. He talks about a lot of interesting stuff in there. Among other things, he says the documentary The Secret, there is a law of attraction, but once you start trying to impose your law of attraction powers upon the free will of another individual, then that is a problem. That's not going to work out. And the documentary, The Secret, didn't really seem to address that conflict too well. But in regards to the New Age movement, I'm sure you know it is a scam. Well, of course you know it's a scam, but you can elaborate all you want. You got the floor on this. What do you have to say about the fraud that is the New Age movement?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned Mark Passio's presentation, because I personally believe, like a lot of his work, is some of the best material to show somebody who doesn't understand that situation. And basically, there are a lot of truths within the teaching of the New Age movement, but there's bits of poison dropped in here and there that is just enough to really damage the paths of people who get involved in it. Now, when I first started to get into this spiritual aspect of what's going on, I waded through a lot of that New Age material. And the stuff like The Secret and all that stuff, and that, don't look at anything that's negative realm. I've found it really prevents people from making any kind of change. And the more I looked into it, the more I found that, it probably was, in fact, a lot of the material is in fact planted. I won't say all of it is, because there are people, who, if I went down that path and then I started writing New Age books instead, I wouldn't necessarily be a shill, but I would just be, misled. And I think a lot of the authors out there are misled about certain things. Mainly a lot of them are on certain overpopulation, global warming bandwagons. A lot of them are on government bandwagons. A lot of them are on anti-gun bandwagons. So, that way of looking at the world can make you very manipulatable. And that is one of my concerns with that. Now, consider the New Age movement as people. I consider them allies, because of the fact that we're more or less on the same page. They're right there with everything. They got a lot of the basics, but, they're misled in certain directions. And I think that, we can be allies with them, but aspects of the philosophy we need to be, vehemently opposed to, as Mark was in his presentation. And I would highly recommend everybody to check that out, as well as all the other presentations from last year's Free Your Mind conference. It was a really great event, and we're going to be doing another one in 2015 in Philadelphia, and we're going to have a lot of details announced soon here in the next month.
Oh, good. I'll definitely book my tickets for that one. Hopefully I'll be able to show up for more than one day. I was only here one day, and it was not for your presentation. I couldn't make it. But I do want to elaborate a little bit on the New Age thing, because I can't help but notice that spiritual people, if you ever try to talk about something negative, they seem to get uncomfortable easily, and they start getting all new agey about the whole thing. One classic example of this was when I was at a consciousness and metaphysics conference in Los Angeles, California. I'm not going to name names here. I'm sure some of my listeners know what I'm talking about here. But this was at a time shortly after some reporters from InfoWars went there and discovered that Fukushima radiation was at extremely high levels on the California coast. And I decided, what the hell, being the loving, caring guy that I am, I'm going to bring some nascent iodine, which you can order from Infowars.com, and bring it with me, and I would be happy to give 5 free drops to everybody at the conference on each day of the conference to keep them safe from Fukushima radiation. I asked the conference heads if that was okay with them, and they said, well, we love you, man, but you're going to make everybody uncomfortable when you talk about Fukushima radiation. And one person in particular said, hey, if you believe that you are infinite and you can't be harmed, then Fukushima radiation will not hurt you. And the first thing I said was, okay, do you ever heard of the New Age movement? Because you just said something that's very New Agey, and if you truly believe that, why don't you buy a ticket to Japan, stand right in front of the Fukushima nuclear reactor and say, I am infinite, I can't be harmed, and then when you start losing your hair in a few minutes, you'll know that there's some sort of a problem. So this is a big issue that I have with the spirituality community. I'm spiritual, but it's very strange how spiritual people get uncomfortable easily when you talk about conspiracy theories and other things that they claim. We got past this. We don't want to talk about this stuff, and it really makes them uncomfortable. And well, case in point, the whole thing about giving people nascent iodine because of Fukushima at the conference. So what's your take on this whole thing about spiritual people getting uncomfortable and getting all new agey and all?
Oh, I completely agree. I wrote an article years ago called "There's Nothing Positive About Watching the World Burn," and that's the exact headline of the article. And that was my response to people who have over the years, because I'm a hippie. I throw raves. I go to raves. I'm in that. I spend so much time talking to New Age people, and when I'm not talking to New Age people, I'm talking to Marxists. So I spend all day pulling my hair out half the time. But I'm very familiar with this point of view. So I try as hard as I can to kind of smash that programming down here in the trenches, in the counterculture that's kind of been co-opted at this point.
Yeah, the irony is there. If that was a Patriot conference or some conspiracy theory conference, so to speak, that was going on in California, if I brought that nascent iodine with me and did that, everybody'd say, oh, sure, we definitely want to take that. But the spiritual people, as I said, they got uncomfortable. What's so ironic, though, is that many spiritual people that don't want to talk about conspiracy theories, they say things like, we got past conspiracy theories a while ago, that's just another religion, we don't discuss it anymore. Well, I don't get me wrong, but if you already got past conspiracy theories as part of your awakening, why does it make you feel uncomfortable when I talk about stuff like that? It seems kind of ironic and counterintuitive, but for some reason spiritual people seem to think that conspiracy stuff, and in some cases patriot community stuff, is fear-mongering and not something they want to talk about because it makes them uncomfortable. I have tried to combine the work of the conspiracy, patriot, and spirituality communities many different times, and I can honestly say I've gotten a lot of flack and criticism for that, for people who insist that those movements cannot be joined together, when in the end we're all loving freedom fighters, so we should be able to get along. Now that I've explained that, do you have anything to say about the irony in that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, personally, there's a project that I'm working on with my friend out in Houston, Derek Brose. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work. but he is actually the founder of a website that I've been dedicating a lot of time to recently, and that is the Conscious Resistance. And the basic mission statement of that is, trying to merge and bring together, the messages of freedom, true freedom, fighting authority, and things with that, along with a spiritual message. So, I'm completely on the same page with that, and I would definitely urge people to check out that, and I think that's something that you would like as well. Because I think that it's important, because there is a spiritual aspect to this fight for freedom. And if the people, another thing that I notice is that a lot of the people who are, of an anti-authoritarian nature, whatever shade that may come in, a lot of times are resistant to spirituality because they're resistant to religion. And so we have both sides. We have, the freedom fighters who many times don't want to look at the spiritual fight, and then you got the spiritual fighters who don't want to look at this fight on the 5 sense level. And I don't believe that, what we're going to need to really complete the action that we're taking on both of these levels, all of us, for this to be successful, I believe.
Damn straight on that one. And by the way, not to accuse the New Age movement of anything, your metaphysics science is, for the most part, spot on. The New Age movement says, problem is you seem to follow the idea that you can sit in a lotus flower position for 8 hours a day and save the world by radiating love and energy. No, in this matrix where fear is unavoidable, you have to become an activist. You have to acknowledge that conspiracy theories are conspiracy facts, and that's a problem with a lot of people in the New Age community, and a lot of people who claim they aren't New Age people in the spirituality community do act New Agey at times, as I've explained, and that is a problem. But moving on to another subject here, I heard you earlier in this interview use the phrase anti-gun. I don't remember the context that you were using it in, but guns are obviously a very, very big deal, because if we lose the Second Amendment unalienable right to bear arms, we lose everything. The government did stage Sandy Hook. If you think that's a conspiracy theory, listen to my interview with Jim Fetzer. In the final 20 minutes, he exposes everything about how Sandy Hook was staged. Well, some say it's not in your best interest to own a gun. Like David Icke, for example, he says, I don't own a gun, I never will, and I hate guns with a passion because I feel that they go against peace on earth. But at the same time, I acknowledge that in this matrix, we need guns to protect ourselves from tyrannical government. So I will fight for the right to bear arms anyway. And with what's been going on in Great Britain, with people being arrested for defending themselves, you can certainly understand that David Icke, being British, would certainly support the right to bear arms, even though he claims to be anti-gun in the end. So this whole thing about gun rights, what do you have to say about it?
First off, I believe that it doesn't matter what that object is. I don't think that objects should be legal. If there is a crime against a person or a property, then there is a crime. But possessing an object, I don't believe is a crime. I think that's the most draconian idea, to come to be. And I think that is one of the tools that the people who oppress us have been using for thousands of years, making objects illegal and then criminalizing people who aren't criminals. So that is my first problem with guns. Personally, I do not own a gun because of the fact that I'm broke, guns are expensive.
First of all, you shouldn't have just said, I don't own a gun. Many people would say it's kind of taboo to say you don't own a gun because that's basically asking for someone to burglarize you. Hey, if you're not worried about that happening, that's your prerogative. But I just want to point that out in regards to that, and I certainly would think that would be a bad idea to say that. So there are guns nearby enough to where that wouldn't be a problem. However, I'll let people read that however they would want to.
I'm not uncomfortable around guns at all, you know. So that's kind of my perspective on it. You know, I do think it's important to point out, though, that the bottom line is that objects should not be illegal, and that guns are objects. So that's my basic opinion on the issue.
Okay, but do you acknowledge the fact that the reason the government wants to disarm the general public is so they can more easily inflict tyranny upon the general public?
Oh yeah, that's always the reason. Yeah.
Okay,
but I think that there's more to that too, because they're also using it so they have another reason to arrest people for no reason. You know what I'm saying? Because if they search your house, you got a gun that, you know, isn't registered, and why would you register a gun? You know, you're screwed. And I think that that's another part to it. So, but like you said, that is just an aspect of tyranny. So, yeah, your description was spot on.
Yeah, so would I be correct in saying you're the kind of guy that would say, I wish there were a world with no guns or weapons whatsoever, because that would be a totally peaceful world where nobody had guns, but at the same time you acknowledge that people need guns to protect themselves from tyrants in government?
Well, not necessarily, because as we spoke before, I don't believe that a utopia is possible necessarily. I believe that there's still going to be disagreements. There's still going to be crazy people. So I think that, you know, guns are still going to be a necessary tool on this planet.
Yeah, I believe they're necessary.
Just because I'm not too skilled with one or have a huge collection, you know, doesn't change anything about, you know, how I feel about them philosophically.
Right. Everybody's got a different opinion on the thing. But if someone becomes brainwashed, people start saying, we got to do it for the children at Sandy Hook, I mean, I'd be the first one to put a bullhorn in that guy's face and say, the government staged Sandy Hook to disarm us, you ignorant, gullible fool. Maybe not in such a rude manner, but you get my drift. And
not only that, I think it's kind of ironic that, I mean, how do you enforce gun control? What do you enforce it with? Guns, right?
Right. Well, they do want to disarm the police and everybody except the global military after they disarm the people, but we got to make sure they don't get the chance to do that. So I guess we might as well change the subject here. I don't know how much work you've done in regards to the history of our species. I did hear you mention earlier the phrase history of our species, and it's just worth pointing out that it kind of makes sense that we are in a slave society because we were created as a slave species. Akashic Records reader Andrew Bartzis did say, and if Andrew Bartzis says it, it must be true because the Akashic Records can't be tampered with. He said that Zecharia Sitchin's first 3 books are very, very accurate. His 4th book onward, he said he screwed up the timelines because there's many timelines coming together on planet Earth. But his first 3 books are very accurate, and yeah, there is a planet Nibiru. The Anunnaki come from there. They genetically engineered us as a slave species, although they were lured to Earth. They didn't come on a mission, and the goal was not to shield the atmosphere of Nibiru, as Sitchin said. It was actually to bring entities back to Earth and also used for consciousness expansion purposes. But the thing that's important about that is, by the way, I just want to quickly point out, I've mentioned it many times on my previous show, so I'm not going to elaborate on it, but Zecharia Sitchin was not a disinformation agent. That stuff was implanted by timeline watchers into our reality to guide us the wrong way on our history. Well, that's what Andrew Bartzis told me after I asked him about that evidence that Sitchin was a fraud. So that's not true, and you can survive on Nibiru. You can survive on any planet. Mainstream science lied to us. Every planet has life because it has its own filtering system, so the fact that Nibiru is in a 3,600-year elliptical orbit is beside the point. But the key issue here, humanity was created as a slave species, and that might be one of the most significant things about our history because it kind of makes sense when you look at the way things are going in the world today. So with that being said, if you can say anything about the history of our species, what can you elaborate on in regards to that?
Well, I don't necessarily go back that far with my writing necessarily. I have with my research, a lot of, Zecharia Sitchin stuff I have read, and I have found a lot of value in it. But when it comes to things, like I said, with history that goes very far back, I tend to not subscribe a particular truth value on one particular point of view. You know what I mean? But I do consider that, slave species point of view as something that does make sense on some levels. It isn't necessarily my worldview or anything, but I think that there is value in the argument, and I wouldn't count it out. I think that we don't really fit on this planet in a lot of ways, and I think that there's definitely a lot of truth to that argument. So I've always really wondered about that, about why we don't necessarily fit on this planet. I'm not a Darwinian, although I do believe in certain aspects of what he said, as far as, creatures do adapt and stuff like that. But, he had a couple of things right, and the rest of it was really just propaganda that was going around the elite circles of scientists that he was involved in at the time. So, I think that it is highly likely that our species came from another planet. Whether or not we were a slave species, that I'm not sure of, but I wouldn't count out the argument.
Okay, just quickly want to point out this show, I don't really get a lot of callers. I guess the reason people don't call in is because this show is important in regards to getting out information, and people don't want to disturb me when I do that. But, hey, if anybody wants to call in, I just want to quickly point out the call-in number is 646-478-4747. If you have a question for John G. Vibes or even a question for me, by all means, call in. But I'm sure I'll come up with enough subjects to discuss if nobody calls in until the show ends at 8 p.m. Eastern. So, I guess history of our species in regard, you said you don't go as far back as Sitchin's 480,000 year period. You are more concerned with modern times, I'm guessing. And, what history time period moving forward are you most concerned about? Well,
I think that it's very interesting, first of all, how farther back the history of our species goes than most, mainstream scientists believe. The work of Graham Hancock and John Anthony West I have found extremely important. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but John Anthony West specifically had a lot to do with the dating of the Sphinx. And I believe, I'm not sure if it was 30,000 years older than...
I can help you with that. John Anthony West, he's kind of an outlier in regards to dating. Most people would assert that the Sphinx was near the time of Atlantis, during the last Ice Age, as a matter of fact, 13,000 years ago or so. And John Anthony West says, no, I disagree with that. Because there was an Ice Age going on planet Earth, I'm going to revert back another 13,000 years to he's doing the 26,000 year, when the precession of the equinox cycle, the last one started. He does not believe, because of the Ice Age, that was when it happened 13,000 years ago, as most do. But there's a lot of people who assert that the fact there was an ice age on Earth is beside the point, because a lot of the beings that were on Earth were such a high-level consciousness that the fact that they were living on a cold planet was beside the point. But we could debate that all along, but I guess if you want to give your take on that, then by all means.
Oh, with that, I find all of the viewpoints interesting, but I don't necessarily have a dog in the fight. I just believe that the Sphinx and a lot of the, great structures, ruins around the world are a lot older than we think they are, and I think that our cultures are a lot older than we think they are. So, I think that as far as the Ice Age goes, I'm not really too sure on that specifically, and would have to do a little bit of research on the other arguments.
Yeah, it is a debatable issue in regards to how much that Ice Age that was going on planet Earth 13,000 years ago really was affecting the Atlantis civilization and maybe other civilizations that were living at the on there at the same time. But that's the deal with that. But in regards to other modern times, things that you're concerned about, correct me if I'm wrong, I seem to recall you mentioned something about the Industrial Revolution in your Free Your Mind conference presentation. Does that time period have any significance on the research that you're doing? Because, like some people have said, the Industrial Revolution, that was a major leap in the way things go on planet Earth, and it wasn't necessarily for a good way. Did you by any chance talk about the Industrial Revolution in your talk, or did I mishear you?
Well, I mentioned aspects of it because, I do believe that there are periods of time in our, history where rapid times of growth happen, where it's like spurts of growth. And I believe that there is some kind of truth to possibly DNA activation and things like that. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it's a growing up of our brain and body and consciousness. I'm not too sure, but it seems that we seem to be growing now, growing in a negative direction sometimes, but there are positive aspects to what happened in the Industrial Revolution. Even as far as manual labor and things like that go, we have to deal with far less hardship than we did back then, especially when it comes to working. A lot less people have to deal with manual labor. Not that there's anything wrong with that. If you do, that kind of stuff actually pays really good these days because less of those jobs are available, which isn't that bad. So I feel that we're kind of on the precipice of another one of them that may completely change the world. And one of the main reasons that I believe is the radical change in manufacturing that 3D printing is about to create. And that is, I think, going to be changed even more by the DeathCAD website that is being created by Cody Wilson, the man that created the 3D printed gun. He's basically trying to create a pirate bay for 3D printers. So if you wanted a new car, if you wanted a new house, if you want a new pair of shoes, you just print it on your 3D printer. And you would get the plans for it off of his website, which would be the pirate bay for manufacturing, essentially. Now, this would put manufacturing, instead of, people would think it would put manufacturing out of business, but no, it would make every individual a manufacturer. And people would then start creating their own products and things like that. Not only their own products that they needed, but their own products to sell as well. Because people wouldn't just get every single thing for free. People would also create their own things, and there would be a trade, probably, economy about it. At least that's my assumption of how it would work out. This is something that we've never seen before on this planet, and nobody can really predict what it's going to be like.
That is true. And in regards to employment, you said the Industrial Revolution was kind of good in the sense that it gave people a feeling of wanting to be employed and all, wanting to work to help humanity and all. That was maybe one positive thing. Well, some might debate that. People say that the powers that be, well, you call them the powers that shouldn't be, they have designed employment on planet Earth to be a system of enslavement. People would say, well, that's absurd because you get paid when you're employed. How can you call it enslavement if you're getting paid? Well, no, the point is employment is designed to put humans as cogs into a system that's ultimately designed to screw humanity over, and employment is designed to keep you from doing all other important things that can help humanity, like spending time out in nature, exposing conspiracy theories, being an activist, doing research, and attaining higher consciousness. So you don't need to be employed, and you can use other currencies besides the dollar and other currencies that we have. That's where people would say that employment is enslavement. So do you have anything to say about the statement, employment is enslavement?
I personally don't believe that employment is enslavement, like philosophically as a general rule, but I believe that in this current paradigm that employment can definitely be enslavement. But generally, if we're on Crusoe's island, and we don't have all this crazy stuff going on, and person A wants to do something for person B for a fee, and they become employed with that person, I don't think that there's a problem with that. But when you have a world where the only real options for employment are at some bureaucracy or monopoly corporation that is going to work you like a dog and not care about you and not pay you anything, and that's the only option, then I think that that's a situation of enslavement.
All right, you're entitled to
that's probably how I'd wrap that up.
You're entitled to your opinion on it. By the way, what is that honking or beeping in the background, just out of curiosity?
Oh, I apologize about that. That's actually my phone. I tried to turn it off earlier. I didn't know if you could hear that or not.
Yeah, I could hear that. I thought it was a truck horn. But, all right, it's nothing of consequence. Let's get on with the interview. You mentioned the word paradigm in your last, just about a minute ago. That's a very significant word in this day and age, because a paradigm, well, you shouldn't follow a paradigm. Some people have asserted that that's one of the key reasons why humanity is trapped, because people follow paradigms. This world would be a much brighter place if everybody was empirical and said, show me the facts. If the facts are indisputable, then I will definitely believe it. That, alas, is not the case. And this does tie in with another issue of the government keeping secrets, because you say the government can't keep secrets. Well, some say, well, of course they can. They're the government. They can, well, no, the truth of the matter is the vast majority of significant government secrets have been exposed. The problem, unfortunately, and I've said this before, I hate saying it, it gets worse every time I say it, but I say it for the sake of waking people up. The reason it's so easy for governments to get away with their secrets being exposed is because a very significant percentage of the common people who make up the general public on planet Earth are so paradigmatic, so fearful, and so flat-out stupid that they will refuse to believe something shocking or disturbing, even if the evidence shows that they have no choice but to believe it. Case in point, the laws of physics violations on 9/11. Now, I'm sorry if I offended everyone. I'm sure I did. But, hey, sometimes you have to insult humanity to wake up the sheeple, and that's the only reason I said it. It's because I care about humanity, so I insult you guys for the sake of waking up people. But I mentioned that people are paradigmatic, fearful, and maybe stupid is a harsh word, but if stupidity is not believing what you have refusing to believe that which you have no choice but to believe, then, well, what isn't stupidity? So even though I realize I may have offended some people, John, what do you have to say about people being paradigmatic, fearful, and stupid, and letting governments get away with conspiracies because of it?
Well, I agree 100%. I mean, these paradigms or worldviews that people get trapped in are, they're controlling their lives, and it's directing all of their decisions about everything that they do. So I really believe that people, like you said, should not have confirmation bias about everything with all these worldviews that don't allow them to think outside the box and look at the world rationally. And that's why, like I did a talk at a festival over the weekend, and like every talk at the beginning and the end, I welcome people to interrupt me at any time. If something they think I'm saying is completely ridiculous, and if they think that they have a better idea of what's going on. And I think that, it's important for us all to kind of have that perspective when looking at our own, path with this whole research and everything.
Damn straight. And, I'd like you to maybe help me out here a little bit. I did mention schooling, banking. Can you refresh my memory here and quickly point out some subjects that you covered besides those things in your 2013 For Your Mind presentation, because we still got about 40 minutes left on the show. I'd like to try to elaborate on some of the other things that you talked about in that presentation that I didn't cover. So what other subjects were there?
One of the most important things that I covered was just property rights and how important that was, especially throughout history. One of the things that I talked about was cultures that we were taught did not have property rights. And in the conference video, one of the things that I discussed was how I personally believe that many of the native and indigenous cultures that we were taught did not believe in property rights. I believe that they did. I believe that they had vast trading histories, even with the Norse and things like that, but also with each other. They had territorial disputes with one another over land, which is property. Not saying that I agree with that or that that's a good thing, but that's what happened. And I just feel that when we have a situation where an individual does not have the right to be left alone on their own property, then there is somebody somewhere taking advantage of them. And if, like we have seen with many situations where there have been excuses that have been made to infringe upon people's property rights, there has been a lot of violence and, unfortunately, a lot of death. So I think that cultures that respect property rights, there isn't this type of systematic violence. Unfortunately, there was like a short time in America and a few other countries where these rights were kind of respected to an extent. Of course, even right after Washington, we had the whiskey rebellions and stuff like that, where those farmers weren't, their property rights were not respected. However, there was still a lot more freedom than there was today, and it was because more respect was paid to individuals and property. So as far as the natives go, they used seashells and things like that for currency. And, I think that all these traits are traits of a country, or not a country rather, but a culture that respects property rights. So I feel that when conquering Europeans come over here, that was their excuse to take the land. Now, I'm not going to say that the native cultures were a completely innocent culture, as some believe. There was basically a variety of different cultures. Some of them had let's see, wars and things like that, human sacrifice, but at the same time, it was still a vast culture that you can't come in and kill everybody. Sorry for losing my train of thought there.
That's okay. I forgive you. And I'm sorry I don't remember everything you discussed in your presentation. If I did, I wouldn't need you to refresh my memory there. But we might as well elaborate on this whole property rights thing. Well, one big issue I have with people nowadays is they have been brainwashed into accepting government property as government can do whatever they want with it. No. The people created the government. Therefore, there is no such thing as government property. It's public property, which means people have the individual right to use it. Classic example of this was the whole Cliven Bundy Ranch thing, where that rancher was getting kicked off of his land by federal agents who wanted to take over his land. And, they say it's government property. They can do that. No, government property is owned by the people. Everybody has the right to be on government property. It's only when you're attempting to harm the property through either negligence or deliberate intent that it's a problem. And that brings up a very important issue that when it comes to rights, everybody has the same rights, and you all have the right to do anything that does not result in you causing harm or intending to cause harm to another person or property through either negligence or deliberate intent. Now, the issue with property rights, though, is when you own your own property, you have the right to make your own rules. So you can make your own rules that forbid something just because you don't like it, even though the rule does not punish or ban something that has anything to do with harm. Now, that might cause a lot of people to be really picky and say, well, private property is kind of selfish because people can do whatever they want. But on the flip side, private property always works out better. Communism will fail as a system because it is so hard to get things done in a society where there is private property. So with that being said, in regards to people making rules for their own property, what do you have to say about how picky people should be and how selfish people should be?
Well, I think that people have a lot of compassion in this world, and I don't think that I think that a lot of the reasons or excuses that governments use to infringe upon people's property rights is because people would not be compassionate enough otherwise, and a lot of excuses like that. That's a lot of the primary underpinnings for the excuse for the income tax and things like that. They believe that people would not be compassionate enough if they were. So I don't believe that. I think that human beings are an extremely compassionate species, despite the fact that we live in systematic violence. I think on an individual basis, humans are extremely compassionate, and that they show a lot of love for one another when given the opportunity and not completely indoctrinated. So, I think that that's definitely one important thing to remember here, that a lot of the people that are pushed away from other people's property rights, it's because of the fact that they have this fear that the world would go into chaos otherwise. So I don't think that people should be selfish, but I think that people have the right to be selfish, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah, it's their property. You do what you want with it. Just don't harm anybody when you make your own rules for your property. I guess that's the proper way of looking at it. But I want to elaborate on this. Agenda 21, when you say excuses to impose the tyranny upon people's property, Agenda 21 is the excuse. We all know that global warming, now known as climate change, is a total hoax, and among other things, that seems to be the number one excuse that they're making to take over people's land, and they're also shutting down coal power plants. I mean, we don't need coal and we don't need oil. The government is suppressing technology that would make those things obsolete, but they do say we need to shut down coal plants because it would help the earth, when shutting down coal plants in the state that we're in would cause a lot of people to suffer greatly. So that's a big deal when it comes to property rights being taken, the whole Agenda 21 thing, and using the fact that, well, we should save Mother Earth. That's the excuse as a way of taking things. That's the whole basis behind it. So Agenda 21, have you done any research on that? And if you have, are there specific key points that you want the general public and my listeners to know about?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I personally live in a rural area, on land that's been owned by my wife's family for many generations. And, this is really all we have. So this is definitely something that I've looked into. And I can't stand the city. And basically, Agenda 21 is a plan to eventually have everybody in cities and not allow people with to homestead their own property and to hold their own property that has been homesteaded or bought legitimately. So, that's definitely one of my main concerns, but obviously it goes a lot deeper than that. The Agenda 21 is definitely a population control agenda.
Population control, we might as well talk about that for a little bit, because there has been a little bit of a debate going on among Illuminati researchers and such who assert that the powers that be do want to depopulate the Earth by at least 80%. It even says that in the United Nations documents, at least 80%. However, other researchers have asserted, no, the majority of Illuminati factions, at least half of the Illuminati factions, they do not want to depopulate the Earth. Instead, they would rather microchip humanity. Well, even if they do depopulate, they want to microchip. But even the ones that don't want to depopulate, they would rather have all of humanity microchipped so they can take away the free will of humanity, or should I say, change the free will of humanity so that we want to use our free will in malevolent ways. And the reason they want us to do that is because part of the Illuminati agenda is to colonize space, a galactic empire, if you will, and they want to use humanity with its free will now being used for malevolent purposes as a cosmic war machine. Well, now that I've told you about that, do you have any comments or statements on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do think that population control is definitely on their agenda because of the fact that it's going to be a lot harder to get us microchipped if there's a lot of us walking around and resisting what's going on. So once they get us microchipped, it'll be real easy to breed us and get whatever kind of population of slave workforce that they want. So I think that population control is a part of the agenda to get the microchip stuff to happen. I don't think necessarily that the microchip goal is as close to completion as some people do. I think that they are way, way over schedule. I think that back in the 70s, they probably were planning that they would have this done by the year 2000. But they're probably way behind schedule, and people they're not going to be able to fight that fight for a very long time because there is a lot of us, and there's a lot of us resisting.
Right, and they have been microchipping animals and such as a stepping stone, and also New Zealand. It was recently in the news. New Zealand schools, they said they want to track children by putting some bracelet around their arm, I believe it was, which contains a microchip device in it. The parents were outraged, but like I said earlier in this interview, a lot of schools, and in this case New Zealand schools, are saying, we don't care about what you parents want us to do. We're going to take away your kid's rights. Your kid will be expelled. It's all a stepping stone procedure to acclimate everyone, and they often use the excuse, if you refuse the microchip, you have something to hide. That's something to hide, or put another way, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. That's one of the oldest tricks used by tyrannical governments since the dawn of time, to brainwash people into giving up their right to be unreasonably searched and have things taken away from them and things imposed on them and such. The government brainwashes us to think that they're doing it for our safety. So I often like to say, if you give up your liberty for security, then you're going to get microchipped, and there goes all your free will. Since I brought that up, the whole issue of governments wanting to brainwash people into giving up liberty for security and using the nothing to hide or something to hide excuse as a trick to brainwash people into going along with it, do you have anything to say about that, since you're a freedom fighter?
Oh, yeah, I think that's just the oldest trick in the book to get people to give up their freedom, is to get them in fear of something. And, as much as I fear something, or as much as people are going to want to put ridiculous lifeboat scenarios into our arguments, like, well, what if this happens? Well, what if that happens? That's why we need all this oppression. I personally am more afraid of the oppression than I am of the possibility of something going wrong if it's not there. And that really is the point of view that I think most people should have, but it's really sad that people are so domesticated. That's really the way I like to put it.
Yeah, with that being said, let's elaborate on that. One of the powers that be, or powers that shouldn't be, as you say, one of their best tools for suppressing human consciousness and also keeping us under control is the NSA surveillance system. Even those people who say, I don't care about the NSA spying because I have nothing to hide, well, those people, they cannot deny that when they are being spied on, they will act differently than they would be if they are not being spied on. And that makes me often say that when someone says, I have nothing to hide, so I have nothing to fear, what that excuse that they're making is a cop-out for their apathy. They claim that they don't care because they have nothing to hide, but what they're actually saying is, I actually don't like having my rights violated, but I think that there's no hope for humanity, and I think there's nothing to do about that we can do about it, so I'm just going to act like I don't care and say I have nothing to hide, so I don't care. So that's what I mean when I say it's an apathy cop-out. But the point I'm trying to make is the NSA surveillance system, it has been exposed thanks to Edward Snowden and his journalist friend Glenn Greenwald, and even previous people like William Binney, Tom Drake, Russell Tice, and others. And the problem is, like, you can't hide anywhere because you're being spied on, and this will make you change your behavior and suppress your consciousness. So as someone who really cares about putting an end to government tyranny, do you have any advice that maybe you might want to give to coping with the NSA surveillance system and maybe being able to get through your life even though you know you're being spied on constantly? How do you advise people deal with that?
Well, first off, I wanted to point out that to the people who say that they have nothing to fear and they have nothing to hide. I think, if that's how they feel, then if they want to get spied on, then whatever, but that does not give them a right to give the government a right to spy on me. So, I should not be punished for their stupidity. Now, if, I were to try to talk them out of their stupidity, I would say that, first of all, there have been no actual terrorists that have been caught with this NSA issue or these NSA techniques. And the only, I would say, I'm not sure the exact, but at least 90%, if not more, of the terrorists that have been caught have been set up by the FBI.
Yeah, that was in a newspaper article in the New York Times, and you're right about the whole NSA thing about not catching terrorists. The reason they're not catching it is because they're part of the conspiracy to let the terrorists get away with it. But hey, sorry I interrupted you. Continue on.
No, you're exactly right, and this is all a setup. They many times try to scare people into submission, and they do this through these random acts of terror that aren't so random. And, we've seen this many times with the underwear bomber who was proven as a setup, and the bomber at the Federal Reserve. And now we have the Department of Homeland Security saying that the number one terrorist threat is sovereign citizens. And so that should tell you exactly the kind of people that are being targeted with this NSA stuff. And now, again, if there's a bunch of, sheep out there who want to say that they don't mind being spied on, then they can go and be sheep, but that does not give them a right to be tyrants over my life.
Yeah, it's a miracle that people can't seem to figure out that NSA spying has nothing to do with safety and security, and it has everything to do with tyranny. And some other questions people should be asking, like if ever, if something were to happen, like some terrorist attack, maybe like let's say the Malaysian flight disaster, I mean, we could tell the NSA, hey, if you're truly spying on everybody, and we know that you are, and if you really don't care about people's rights and all, why don't you just release all the information that we need to solve this mystery of what happened with the Malaysian flight disaster? And maybe anything else that happens, you can say, well, let's go to the NSA. They were spying on everybody, so they know the truth. And I'm sure the NSA would say, we can't release this information because it would endanger national security. And don't even get me started on how much it pisses me off that people actually think that the phrase national security has something to do with the security of the nation. It obviously doesn't. If it did, then we would have secured the borders a while ago, and we haven't. Just look at all the news that's going on in regards to illegal immigrants. So I might as well ask you this, John. What does the phrase national security mean to you?
It means protection for the slave master, essentially, or slave masters.
You definitely said it pretty well on that one.
That's the long and short of it.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the security of the nation. It has a lot to do with the security of info that would expose the tyrants for the fraud that they are, and it has a lot to do with brainwashing people into giving up their rights so they can impose global totalitarian government. But all right, I want to change the subject here and get back to the rave thing for a moment. A lot of people do the stereotype of associating raves with drug use, like LSD and ecstasy. Well, when it comes to drug use, first of all, the government, the laws that ban drugs, they're not actually laws. They're public policy. A lot of the things we call laws are not laws. They're what is considered to be public policy by someone in the government. So to say that drugs are illegal is a lie. It's an illusion. It's not. And we never gave the government the right to interfere in our private individual capacity, and the government does not have authority to interfere with our lives unless we give them individual consent, because as Mark Passio said in his New Age presentation, if you cannot do something as an individual, then you cannot get together with a group of people and do the same thing, because in your individual capacity, that was an authority you never had. So getting together in a group does not grant that authority any better than it did as an individual. So if I, as an individual, cannot stop someone from using drugs in the privacy of their own home when they're not hurting anyone else in the process, then does that mean that the government does not have authority to do the same? Yes, it implied that the government does not have authority to prevent people from doing drugs in their private individual capacities. It's only when you use the excuse of being under the influence to cause harm to another person or property through deliberate intent or negligence that drug use does become illegal. It's the harm factor. But for the purposes of this conversation, in regards to raves, there are certain drugs that are associated with the rave scene, like LSD and ecstasy, and people would assert, well, that's a bad way of doing drugs. That's recreational drug use. If you do drugs, it makes sense to use them as entheogens. Now, not all drugs can be used as entheogens. Mostly only hallucinogenic ones can. And even then, some say that the only drugs that can be considered entheogens are the ones that come from plants and funguses, like magic mushrooms. But many would disagree with that. But the point is, in regards to drug use, and specifically drug use in regards to the rave scene, do you have anything to say, like, if you want to do drugs, this is how I would recommend it?
Yeah, I think it's an important discussion, and basically, I feel that as you said, the most value, to get the most value out of a psychedelic experience, it is important to use it as an entheogen in the proper set and setting. However, I believe that there is still an important, there is an important ritualistic aspect to doing that in a group setting. And when I say ritualistic aspects, what I mean is just, connecting with other human beings when they are also in a heightened state of consciousness. I'm not talking about any kind of voodoo or anything like that. There is more than one path with psychedelics, but I also believe that it is important to consider moderation and to not let shamanism go down the wrong path. Because there is a light and a dark to everything, to every path in this world. And if you don't watch out, then, you can turn a powerful tool into a powerful weapon. And, that is one of the things that I talk about a lot because of the fact that, there is freedom in the rave scene. So I would say that generally there are more sober people at a rave than you would see at a hip-hop concert or a rock concert. More people are sober, be more openly on more socially acceptable types of drugs, the small percentage of people that are actually on them. Now, I don't think that the legal drugs are any better than the non-legal drugs that are out there. And I think that if used in moderation, there is value to doing that in a group setting. And as far as prohibition is concerned, I have an article out there called 8 Reasons to End Prohibition Immediately. And I believe, as I stated in that article, that people who don't do drugs and people who do drugs would both benefit if prohibition was ended for all drugs, and even the nasty ones that I completely think are terrible for people. So I think that for example, the violent crime that goes on in this world, a vast majority of it is due to the prohibition of items and the black market sale of those items, mainly because there is no peaceful means of dispute resolution within those circles, and there is pretty much total anonymity because there is no branding or marketing with anything. If somebody sells a dirty bag of heroin or something, there's no tracing it back to where that comes from. If Budweiser has a product that is not up to par, everybody knows where it comes from. Legal action can be taken upon the company, and the victims of whatever, botched product would be compensated. Additionally, we have issues with overdoses and things like that. Most overdoses happen because people are afraid to call for an ambulance because they're going to get thrown in a cage. And that is a really sad fact of a lot of what's going on. Now, I think the violent crime aspect is really the most important thing to call attention to, because we have historical examples of this not too long ago with alcohol prohibition. There was, all the gangsters and the gang warfare and the street violence that came from that. And now the whole thing is happening all over again, just with a different setting and a different backdrop with drugs. So there are unintended consequences to using force to try to impose, these kind of, uniform, societal traits onto people, like staying away from drugs and doing things like that. As I said earlier, if there's a crime against a person or property, then there needs to be retribution for that. But objects should not be legal, and not just because people should be able to have the objects, but also because of the many external factors, everybody.
Right. But the big issue with people wanting drugs to be made illegal is this ties in with the fear factor, because everybody is so paranoid that they say, we need to ban drugs because someone might get under the influence and cause harm. So even if they're doing it in the privacy of their own home, we should still ban it because they might cause harm. Well, the government does not have authority to take away rights just because someone might be a risk. The only time you can take away rights is if the totality of the circumstances requires that rights be taken, because if you don't take them, then it is 100%, meant by totality, 100% certain that some harm will be caused. So the might be a safety risk factor does not hold water when it comes to rights being taken. It may hold water when you're talking about privileges. Now, privileges can be taken because someone might be at risk, but such is not the case with rights. But unfortunately, so many people are so fearful and paranoid that they will use the might be a risk excuse to justify restricting rights, even though they can't be restricted or taken away. But that is really sad and depressing that people will act like that. But in regards to due process, since you care about fighting for freedom so much, I guess this is a thing we can talk about. Due process. It's been said by many in the world of law that the slightest due process violation, if there is committed by the prosecution, then the defendant must be found innocent. Because if the prosecution is allowed to find, and the judge and the courts find someone guilty, even though the prosecution did not, or the courts did not give proper due process, then that would open up a whole new can of worms where the courts would think, well, we got away with this once, so we're going to do it again. So that is why in any situation where there is a due process violation, the defendant must be found innocent even though he did the crime. One classic example of this that Alex Jones has used a lot, he says O.J. Simpson, it's overwhelmingly convincing he did the murder, but he deserved to be found innocent because the evidence was tampered with by the prosecution. We all know he was found innocent because if the glove don't fit, you must acquit, but the courts picked the wrong reason to find him innocent. If they wanted a good reason to find him innocent, it should have been because the prosecution tampered with evidence. So, as someone who cares about rights, do you agree with the idea that if there is the slightest bit of due process violation, then the defendant deserves to have the right to walk free even though he or she committed the crime?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're obviously in a situation where we don't have due process because all you need to do is look at what happened with Christopher Dorner last year, where a man who, under nebulous evidence of these crimes, which he apparently committed, was killed by police without a doubt, on video or on audio recording, and without any kind of due process. And nobody really seemed to care, unfortunately. And to that point as well about courts and stuff, I think that we have a system of kangaroo courts in this country because of the fact that the prosecution, and the judge, and many times even the defense are all on the same side working for the same organization. And in my opinion, that's a massive conflict of interest.
Oh, yeah, it is definitely a huge conflict of interest, and that seems especially true when members of the Goldman Sachs gang or J.P. Morgan Chase, which are arguably the two most powerful of the mega banks, often get their cronies put in positions of power. John the Slime Corzine, a good example, former New Jersey governor, he got caught stealing a lot of money, didn't get in trouble. He used to be a member of the Goldman Sachs gang, and that probably had a lot to do with it. So I can give you about 5.5 minutes after I'm done talking about what I'm about to say, but I guess we might as well end on a hope for humanity standpoint. Two figures that I often name when I talk about this subject, well, actually three now. First is Jordan Maxwell, probably the most prominent of all pessimists in this regard. He has said there is no hope for humanity. Humanity cannot be saved. People are too paradigmatic, too apathetic, too fearful, too stupid. He even said 9/11 was what did it in for him. He said to see that 1,000-foot tall skyscrapers could get pulverized into microscopic dust and nobody except a small handful of conspiracy theorists expressed doubts and raised questions about it on the day it happened was enough to make him almost give up on humanity. And that's why he says he thinks humanity is screwed and there's a train wreck coming, totalitarian government. But two other individuals, George Kavaslis, I interviewed him on this subject. He said that he felt within his heart, soul, essence that Mother Earth is a love-based entity, and that means the New World Order, it may come down hard at times, but in the end, it will never fulfill its global totalitarian agenda. And I guess you can make the case that that's true with all planets because infinite love is the only truth. Everything else, including fear, is an illusion or so. some say, and Andrew Bartzis, he has said that since 2011, and I'm sure the date was probably October 28th, 2011, as Carl Johan Kalimann talked about, that date signified the end of all false timelines, and ever since that date, the Archon control system has been cannibalizing itself, and that flat out flies in the face of Jordan Maxwell's claim that there's no hope for humanity, because eventually the Archon system, it may take a while, but in the end, they will shut down entirely, and we will attain higher consciousness. So, unfortunately, I can only give you 5 minutes on this subject. What do you have to say about the hope for humanity factor?
Well, actually, I think that there's a lot of hope for humanity, and I understand where Jordan Maxwell's coming from. He is a man who has been relentlessly trying to pound this truth into people's heads for decades, and as artists and as teachers and things like that, sometimes we're our own worst critics. But I don't really know if Jordan Maxwell understands or realizes the amount of work that he has put in and the effect that it has had. And it's not just him, but he is one of the pioneers in this field. And I really believe that it has made a difference because, yeah, maybe right after 9/11, people were completely stupid about everything. But look at what's happened. I mean, it's been years now, decades, and people slowly but surely have waken up in different ways. I mean, the whole 9/11 thing's starting to fall apart. I know that Jeff Berwick just wrote an article for the Dollar Vigilante that talked about how the 9/11 myth is falling apart. Richard Gage of 9/11 Truth Architects and Engineers was just on C-SPAN making his case in a very serious and academic way. Now, that would have never happened 10 years ago. So I can see Jordan Maxwell getting discouraged, and, I understand he's been in this fight for a long time, and, but it's starting to happen. And I think that we're going to be able to witness some really, really amazing things. And I think that even Jordan will be around to see it.
I'm sure he'll be around to see it too. His spirit will live on so long, even if he dies. He's got I don't know how many years left. He is an old man now, but I'm sure that they'll let him keep living a life to see that his prediction will be wrong and he'll be able to die a happy man. Well, that's my prediction.
I believe he will.
I believe he will too. I mean, if people deserve to live to a ripe old age to see themselves get proven wrong, it would have to be him of all people. So, but anyway, well, I got a couple minutes, but I don't really have anything to talk about, so I guess I might as well end the transmission on this show, and I'll end it by telling you the same thing that I tell all my guests. I loved having you on, and as much as I would love having you on again, I probably won't, because one of my goals of this show is to try to get as many different people on as possible before giving the same guest double dips, because I feel that is the fairest way to do the show, and also probably the best way to get out important information to expose the nature of reality from many different points of view. So please don't feel offended if I don't contact you in the future. That's only because there's a lot of other fascinating individuals who I need to give an opportunity to come on my show. But it was a fascinating talk, John. I loved having you on. I even learned a few things in this talk. So I do wish you good luck, and I do hope to see you at the conference in 2015 if you're planning on being there, because I'll be there.
Oh, I'll definitely be there, and I'll probably be one of the speakers as well. So I'll be volunteering again and helping organize.
I'm glad to hear that. Well, John, take care. It was a pleasure having you on.
All right, thanks a lot. You too. Have a great night.
Namaste. Take care.
Bye.
Well, folks, love that interview. Learned a few things, as I said. And next week I'm going to have Freighter X. I don't remember if he was on the 2013 conference or 2011 For Your Mind conference, but he will be the guest next week. What is his real name? I don't actually know, but he goes by the name Freighter X. He will be the guest on next week's show. So without further ado, namaste everywhere. And Sean Cohen, who just joined in the chat room, said, well, re-listen in the archives. I'm glad to hear that, Sean. I'll re-listen to this too, so I can better digest the information. Because when you're doing the show live, you got to think about what you're going to talk to your guests. So you can't really digest all the information well, and that is why I will listen to this and probably all the other interviews I do with my guests. So, with that being said, namaste, everybody. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your journey throughout infinite love and infinite consciousness. This is Andrew Fisher, Nature of Reality Radio, signing off.